So, Guilty Gear Strive came out, and I played it. A little. And I have things to say about this game. I've played this series for most of my life now, not to mention that it feels like just saying the name of a series out loud improves my blood circulation. So I was really looking forward to this game, especially since it's technically the last chapter of Guilty Gear's overall storyline. But then they started going into how the game will be played and... well, let's just say it raised a few red flags for me. But let's not skip ahead and do everything in due order. Just... have to wait for the game to communicate with the server real quick. This has taken a while. Okay, there we go, finally. Let's start with the game's presentation. For starters, I really like the main menu. Every type of gameplay has its own tab which unfolds into subfolders where you can choose the option you want. It's neat and it doesn't clutter the screen too much. Story tab allows you to access the GG World library, when you can look up the story's timeline, correlation charts, and the glossary. The only complaint here is that the glossary apparently lacks search function of any kind, making looking up certain things in it a pain in the ass. Convenient menu design also extends into the training mode. Back in Xrd, all the options for training mode were just thrown into the main pause menu, where you had to look up for the option that you needed. Strive puts training-specific options into a separate tab, where you can look up whatever you might need without having to scroll through a long list of things every time. Another great change is that move list now shows a short video and an explanation for every move listed. This is very useful for when you start learning the characters. The only menu I don't really like is the character select. It's very cool that the game gives you a brief explanation for each character here, telling you their specialty and how they perform at different ranges, but character portraits being displayed closer to the bottom of the screen leaves a huge empty space in the center, where the focus should normally be. The menu itself looks aesthetically bland, but I'll come back to that one a bit later. The in-game graphics are gorgeous. Combined with the amazing handmade animations that are a pain in the ass to do as I understand, they give the game an amazing look. This is probably the best looking fighting game on the market right now. Notably, while the character models in Xrd were designed to resemble 2D sprites, which made the in-game animations look good only at certain angles, Strive fully embraces its 3D design with new models and animations. I do have some issues though. No one can see the colors but you, says the Faust theme song, but actually, I cannot see the colors either. They get washed out really hard in some stages, these two being the worst offenders. Kai's lightning is now orange for some reason. Why? What was the thinking behind that? It was the proper blue in the beta, so why the change? The blur is also a bit too strong sometimes to the point of being annoying. The in-game animations are all very well done. You can feel the flow of movement in all of them. They still use the same tricks they did in Xrd to better convey the weapon swings as well. The biggest standout is probably Zato and Eddie, whose animations are incredible, just look at this! One big problem that I found is that some of Soul's animations don't make sense in terms of continuity. It's especially visible during Bandit Bringer, where his sword just kind of teleports to his left hand. But other than that, the in-game animations are all great. Look at this happy Brit. I wish I could say the same about the intro and outro animations, most of which are unfortunately very simplistic. Intro animations at least do pretty well in terms of showing personality of a character. For example, I can see from this animation that Anji is all about theatrics. The big issue here is that the animations aren't dynamic enough. The worst offenders are definitely Sol and Kai, who just walk onto the arena, do some simple gestures, and the fight starts. Melee has it a little better, but it's still bad. Second player's animations even get cut off during the intro. Back in Xrd, the animations were pretty rough sometimes, but they were carried by how dynamic they are. Take Kai's intro for example. Kai simply walks onto the arena, takes out his sword, and assumes the fighting stance. This is more or less the same thing he does in Strive, but it looks so much better thanks to the dynamic camera work. And then there are fancier animations like Milia, Venom, and Slayer. All of them share the dynamic camera work that gives them what can only be described as the sense of coolness. and that sense of coolness is something the animations in Strive lack for the most part. This is really weird in hindsight too. Intros and outros were so much better done in Xrd, even if the animations themselves were rough sometimes, which could be easily blamed on the developers just figuring out how to work with this whole 3D anime thing. And even in Xrd, you could see this aspect evolve with the release of new versions and DLC characters. Hell, the developers, Team Red, even made 2 more games in the same style as Guilty Gear Xrd, so they had plenty of time and opportunities to figure this thing out, which I know they did. Just look at the animations in Dragon Ball and the Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. You could say that this was before the goings-on in the world started, but look at this. This was being worked on at the same time, so why does the company's flagship franchise get the short end of a stick? I thought all of their experience would really shine here. I was especially hoping to see the special intro animations between certain characters, like the ones seen in previous games.
少し付き合ってもらうぞ。
またお前か。君のファンになりそうだ。構わんかな。じいじはしゃいでんじゃねえ。
I wanted these to come back real bad, and you know what? Back when they shown the very first trailer for Strive, this part here actually looked like this could be a special intro animation for Sol and Kai. It really does look that way. I know it's my fault for getting my hopes up, but it's still a goddamn shame Strive lost a lot of cool stuff compared to other games, especially seeing how well done the in-game animations are. I also don't really like how Heavenly Potemkin Buster no longer has an emphasis on the opponent's reaction, unlike Xrd where you could see them realize that they'll need a back surgery after this. And that during Faust's new wheelchair overdrive, everyone's reaction is more or less while stimulating Fists of Annihilation gave a great range of emotions. But honestly, these two are nitpicks more than anything. Unfortunately, the intro and outro animations aren't the only weak point in the game's presentation. First, this UI is garbage. Sure, it's not as bad as it was during the first beta test, but it's still awful. It's just naked gauges with barely any visual design. What the hell are these heart symbols? I know they are supposed to represent rounds, but why hearts? Why not something more thematically appropriate? Like gears. You know, like in the series name, Guilty Gear. I am pretty sure this was not done to make the UI easier to read, since it was perfectly readable on previous games while still having the old heavy metal aesthetic. The devs are perfectly aware of this issue as well. Ishiwatari-san promised that they will make the UI rock, but this isn't rock at all, this is just lazy. There is also a functionality problem with tension gauge over here. In previous games, the gauge would change color depending on how much tension you have, so you can easily tell how much you have, if little eye movement for periphery vision. No such thing here. Unfortunately, Strive's issues don't end with UI design. The game in general suffers heavily in the aesthetics department. In terms of aesthetics, Guilty Gear is known for 2 things: exaggerated 90s anime character design and heavy metal. Heavy metal doesn't just refer to the music genre too, it also refers to the material. Menus in the old games had this heavy machinery vibe to them, which I always really liked. None of that here either. At least they picked red as their main color this time, unlike Rev 2 where they literally picked the worst color a human eye can see. The worst offender is definitely the versus screen. This is just letterboxes with parts of character mugshots in this bird. Don't get me wrong, this is a very beautiful bird, but the versus screen is still bland and static. It also acts as the loading screen, so if your computer starts to lag, or if you are playing on a base PS4, you might end up having to look at the screen for around 30 seconds. Joy. Xrd versus screen was also used for loading, but there you actually have something thematically appropriate to look at. The only thing metal about the menus here is this ready plate when you picked a character. Thankfully the situation is a lot better with the character designs, most of which are good evolution of their previous looks. There are drastic redesigns like Faust, who went from being a goofy doctor to looking like a slasher villain, and Eddie, who looks like he's really been skipping on his vegetables. Then there are more elaborate versions of old designs on Melee and Zato, then there is the awesome new design on Ino, then there are stupid pants with stupid rope built on chip. And then there are Kai, Mei and Leo. These are definitely a downgrade. First of all, Mei. In previous games she had a great design that made her look like an actual crew member of a sky pirate ship. But here, the only reminders of that are her hat and anchor. The rest of the outfit is just an orange hoodie and bike shorts. She looks like a random girl with a pirate hat now. But at least unlike Xard, she actually looks her age. Kai and Leo also dropped their fantastical designs for these more realistic outfits. There is an actual war crime on display, and it's right here. Can you see it? No? And now? This belt buckle, cheesy as it is, was one of the most iconic parts of character design in the entire series. It perfectly conveyed the main idea behind Kai as a character. A knight who wanted to do the right thing in the world and bring hope to people. This motif continued into a slightly more elaborate Xard design. I get none of that from his Strive getup. He's just a guy dressed to go for the groceries now. His main color is also now black, the complete opposite of his usual color scheme. Not a very hopeful color, shall we say. Now Leo. I appreciate that they gave him non-tight pants, but I really miss this thing about his old design where it was hard to tell where Leo's hair ended and the fur on his coat began, making it look like an enormous lion's mane, which happens to be his primary motif, lions and pride. His old outfit was bombastic, which suited his personality perfectly. Here, once again, he has a fairly realistic coat with furred collar. Because of it, he completely lost his regal look, which is an issue he actually shares with Kai since they are both kings. Finally, there are the two new characters. I will discuss their gameplay in the character breakdown section, so for now let's focus on their visual design. First up is Nagoriyuki, a big black vampire samurai. His visual design is really cool and elaborate. His mask makes him intimidating, but his mannerisms convey a samurai-like aura of dignity and discipline, which actually somewhat plays into his gameplay, more on that in the character breakdown. A very cool looking character overall. On the other hand, Giovanna has a very grounded, realistic design, big green dog notwithstanding. Now, her design could actually be a great fit for the series as the one person who doesn't look ridiculous. You can literally imagine her entering the waiting room for an audition, seeing all the other characters and saying, "What is wrong with all these people?" Unfortunately, the new grounded designs on other characters take a lot away from her uniqueness. Overall, I'd say that the new character designs are pretty good. Even the designs on Kai, Mei and Leo are actually good on their own, and their problem is that they are trying to be grounded and semi-realistic in the series that lives and breathes ridiculous, crazy, awesome anime aesthetic, with heavy metal inspirations, which also ends up hurting one of the newcomers. Next up is the music, and by the gods, Shivatari-san delivers as he always does. All characters once again get new theme songs, only this time all of them come with vocals. Naoki Hashimoto is back on vocals and he does an amazing job once again. A new vocalist, Aisha, also provides vocals for Mace, Milius and Ramlethal's theme songs, and doing a great job. Mace's theme in particular really took off, shall we say. The soundtrack overall is a great listen. Here, check out some samples.
Never stop, just go. I don't care how many more
This is all really good. References to the original themes and songs by other performers make it even better. I certainly did not expect Leo's theme to reference Great King Red. One thing I want to note is that it would be really nice to be able to toggle between vocal and instrumental versions. Instrumental version of the game's main theme, Smell of the Game, is played on the character select screen, and it's still a great listen even without the vocals. Man, these are all great. I wonder what kind of song Soul vs Sky matchup has. Wait. Where's the Soul vs Sky theme? That's right, there is none. There is no Soul vs Sky theme song. In fact, there are no special matchup theme songs at all. No Soul vs Sky, no Milia vs Zato, and no same character theme songs. Why? At least Arcade Boss Fight has a hype theme song, but why aren't these ones in the game? Actually, this game doesn't get its own music for menus in the versus screen either. All the menus are reusing story mode music from Exard, while the versus screen uses the vocal version of Revelator's arcade boss theme. What happened here? Thankfully, like in Exard, you can unlock songs from previous games. Once you unlock them, you can listen to them in the gallery or set them as background music during fights. Unfortunately, they still didn't figure out a way to quickly sort through all the battle music you unlocked, so finding a song you like can still be a pain. I would also appreciate it if I could choose which songs I actually want to be in the selection, as some vocal tracks from Exard like Coming Home or Lily are not really a good choice for a fight in my opinion. Okay, now that we're done with the game's presentation, it's time to get into the gameplay aspect of this game. For this, I will require the help of my beautiful assistant, Leo! The most of the basic controls are the same. Just as before, you have the 5 attack buttons: Punch, Kick, Slash, Heavy Slash, and Dust. Slash attack has close and far variations. Punch through Heavy Slash act as different levels of attack strength, and Dust is the universal launcher, which becomes a sweep when crouched, and a character-specific attack when airborne. All characters have the forward punch command normal, that acts as the universal anti-air. Even if it doesn't really make sense due to animation, but okay. The first big change is the way you execute a throw. Now you have to press forward or back and Dust to throw your opponent. The throw also now works like it does in modern Street Fighter or in BlazBlue. You can press the command to do a throw at any moment, but if you are not in the right range, the throw will whiff, and you will be wide open for a punishment. This felt awkward at first, but I got used to it pretty quickly. The way Dust work has also been changed. A simple button press will do a quicker version of a Dust attack that only puts the opponent into the off-the-ground state, where their feet have already left the ground, and the next attack will send them flying. Certain other attacks also have this property, though which ones they are is different between the characters. To do the old-school Dust launcher, you need to hold the Dust button down. Note that the combo routes change completely while you are attacking a Dust opponent. Also, remember that despite being a launcher, Dust is an overhead attack, even if it comes from below. If you hit your opponent when they are in the middle of their own attack, the game will count it as a counter hit and display the appropriate message. Counter hits change the properties of some of your moves. For example, normally, Soul's forward heavy slash will simply result in a knockdown, but on a counter hit, it will make the opponent bounce off the ground, open for some more punishment. The game slows down time momentarily on counter hits as well, allowing you to more easily react to them and act appropriately. I felt that it breaks the pace of the fight at first, but you get used to it after a while. In the lower part of a screen you have the tension gauge, which is Guilty Gear's super meter. With it, you can either spend 50 tension to use a powerful overdrive attack or on other mechanics that I will talk about later. But beware, if you run away too much, you will have this danger warning and your tension will start to drain. Keep it up, and you will be hit with negative penalty that takes away all of your tension because you're being a chicken. Note that this doesn't apply to when you are playing Keep Away or Turtling. Overall, these systems are universal for all characters, but playstyles vary wildly between them, which makes them unique each in their own way. For example, Kai is a simple shot-a-clone type of character, easy to grasp and play as. You either go full close quarters to pressure your opponent with solid attacks, or try to zone them up with projectiles. Meanwhile, Axel is a full zoner who fights best at longer distances and has a lot of tools to keep the opponent away. Then there is Faust, who employs a lot of trickery like teleportation mix-ups and using random items to change the flow of battle, or to give you an off-road. It's a good bloody off-road. Guilty Gear has no shortage of unique characters, both in visual design and gameplay, with only another Arc System Works game, BlazBlue, being able to outdo it. Now let's talk about mobility. While ground mobility remains mostly unchanged from the previous games, air mobility has been seriously tweaked. First, the jump arcs have been shortened, especially for the backwards jump, which covers just over the half of the forward jump. Air dashing also has been changed. Forward air dash now has this lag before getting a speed boost with this bright magical seal or whatever it is, which makes air dash more reactable for the opponent. You also cannot attack during the first few frames of the air dash, so be careful. Backward air dash is so short it has become practically useless as a defensive tool. It barely has any coverage. You can still use it for left-right mix-ups, but for moving away from the opponent you are better off using the ground backdash. I think making the fights more grounded was one of the core ideas here, which is weird, considering how the series usually plays. Another big change to the game's gameplay compared to previous ones is how recovery, or ukemi if you will, works. First, there is no air recovery anymore. At all. If you get hit in the air, you're flying all the way down till you hit the ground. Second, there are two types of knockdown, which we will call soft knockdown and hard knockdown. During soft knockdown, you will recover automatically when hitting the ground by rolling backwards, while during the hard knockdown, you will be lying on the ground open for another attack. Thankfully, the window to hit you during hard knockdown is pretty small, and you are invincible during the wake-up animation. So if your opponent lags even a little, you will be able to get up, ready to execute your revenge for making you lie in dirt, and potentially even punish a late attack. The next big change concerns the way normal attacks are chained between each other. In previous Guilty Gear games, you can chain all the main 4 attack buttons into each other, going from punch to heavy slash and command normals, with some differences when crouched or airborne. This system is called Gatling combination, and is one of the best mechanics in Guilty Gear. It gives you an amazing freedom in how you construct your combos. You can do something simple, or you can do something batshit crazy. So the developers, in their infinite wisdom, removed this system entirely. Now only certain normal attacks can be chained, which removes most of the freedom of previous games. It works like this. Punch can only be chained into itself and command normals. Kick can only be chained into dust and command normals. Close slash can be chained into far slash, heavy slash, dust and command normals. Far slash can only be chained into heavy slash. Heavy slash cannot be chained into anything. Crouch slash counts as far slash. Only kicks and close slash can be cancelled with a jump. All normals and most command normals cancel into specials and overdrives. With rare exceptions, this system is universal. While the game still calls it Gatling combination, you aren't rotating between the buttons as the word Gatling implies. You push 2 or 3 buttons, then do a special. This isn't Gatling, this is just double barrel? Yeah, I'll call it double barrel from now on. This system is very limited and takes away most of the freedom you had in previous games, more or less forcing you into specific combo routes, which doesn't feel pleasant if you're an old fan who is used to this sort of freedom. Another big change is the amount of damage dealt on average. The damage has been increased, and I mean increased. A simple chain of normal attacks does a considerable damage, and a simple combo can just straight up destroy half of your health gauge. And Potemkin Buster? Oh, just look at this!
Now that's a lot of damage!
This right here is the core philosophy behind the design of Strive's gameplay. They wanted to make the game more accessible to new players, which is understandable, and one of the main complaints regarding the series is that it's too complex and difficult to learn, never mind that that's not actually true. So they decided to simplify the game, and they went the worst possible way about it, taking things away. As said by the developers themselves, in previous titles the player could experience the tension and exhilaration of the fast-paced matches only after a lot of practicing and learning complicated combos, which is false but more on that later, so they made combos much shorter through double-barrel combo system and increased the damage to complement it. Character movesets have also been shortened, with some staple moves going out the window completely. The developers said that they weren't making the game with the idea of removing things from previous games, but that's exactly what they ended up doing, whether they wanted it or not. I know this isn't a big deal for the new players, since they are starting from zero, but for me as an old fan, it comes off as the game just being dumbed down. The best analogy I can think of is, it feels like some of my fingers have been cut off. Sure, it's easier to control fewer fingers, but I still wish I had the ones that have been cut off so I could do more things with them. Also, I have a huge issue with the double barrel system in that it actually became harder to get into the game in my opinion. Let me explain here. In previous games, the Gatling mechanic would allow you to make something resembling a decent combo simply by mashing buttons. That is precisely because Gatlings allow you to chain most attack together, so at the early levels, it is perfectly possible to get away with simply mashing buttons. But then you start noticing that certain attacks work well when you specifically chain them together. And then something in your brain clicks, and you would start intentionally looking for attacks that go well together and allow you to deal more damage, as well as look ridiculously cool with your smoking sexy style. I think this approach to learning the game and the characters works very well. It's intuitive and simple to understand, and most importantly, it's fun. It certainly feels easier than, for example, the King of Fighters with its strict combo rules. Strife's limited combo game takes a lot away from that fun and makes it less intuitive to learn. I am pretty sure that slashing with your sword after kicking your opponent in the shin makes a lot of sense, but the double barrel system makes it that half of your attacks just don't communicate with each other. Additionally, the increase in damage is really punishing for the new players in my opinion. One simple mistake can lead to losing half of your health. Sure, you could say this was the case in previous games as well, but there you had to work on the damage with long combos, or if you're like me, shorter combos with constant pressure. But here, you don't need that. One simple combo can lead to half of your health being gone. It can be argued that these changes do make it easier for the new players by having them think about fewer things during a match, but I think that the unintuitive nature of this double barrel system and how punishing the big damages outweighs the positives. Okay, now let's talk about the defensive mechanics. You of course have your usual block from every fighting game in existence, which you do by holding the direction away from your opponent. When you block an attack just as it connects, you perform the instant block that doesn't push you away from your opponent, prevents cheap damage and gives you some tension. This is a more advanced technique that requires some learning. I still couldn't pull it off consistently if my life depended on it. Although there is a good reason not to be blocking all the time anyway. See this purple line? That's your risk gauge. It increases when you block attacks. Block too much and it will turn red, at which point, if you get hit, it will be a forced counter hit, which means that you will get hurt worse than you usually would. This mechanic heavily discourages turtling, which plays into the series' offense-oriented nature, similarly to negative penalty. Faultless defense, a staple mechanic for the series, also makes a comeback. Faultless defense is used to nullify cheap damage you receive from specials and overdrives when blocking, while sacrificing some of your tension. You use FD by holding back and any two attack buttons except dust. For some reason you can no longer map to button press on a controller, which kind of threw me off at first since I got used to holding R2 to use this mechanic in Blaze Blue, where you need to press specific buttons, but it's no big deal here. The final purely defensive mechanic is the Psych Burst. Using it will blast the opponent away from you, and you can use it while getting hit to prevent further damage. For example, if you made a mistake and whiffed a risky attack and the opponent punished you, you can get out of the ensuing combo by bursting. Be aware though that bursting leaves you open momentarily and it can be blocked, so if your opponent can predict your burst and block or dodge it, they will be able to continue attacking. If you burst without being hit, you execute a Gold Burst. If it successfully hits your opponent, you get 100 tension. But don't forget about the risky nature of this mechanic and don't just run up to your opponent and burst like a dummy. Another reason to be careful with bursting is that it's tied to a separate gauge that feels as you receive damage. So, if you wasted your burst, it will be a while before you will be able to use it again. Also be aware that you cannot burst when the opponent hits you if they are overdrive. Overall, this is a great defensive second chance type of mechanic that allows you to make a comeback after being hit. And aren't comeback victories the sweetest ones? Some attacks, like Sol's Fafnir or Potemkin's Garuda Impact, put the blocking opponent into a guard crush state, in which they can only block or burst. If you are put into a guard crush state, it usually means that your opponent will be able to move first, so do not try to initiate a counterattack after the guard crush state ends, and focus on dealing with whatever attack your opponent will use next, which includes throws, so be on your toes. Okay, time to discuss Guilty Gear's signature mechanic, the Roman Cancel. As you can understand from its name, you use it to cancel your current action into a neutral state, with an added bonus of slowing down time and the opponent by pressing 3 attack buttons except dust at the same time. However, it's not that simple. RC uses up 50 tension, the same resource you use for overdrives, so you cannot spam it. Also, there are 4 types of Roman Cancel. Yes, indeed, they wanted to make a game that's friendly to newbies, so here's 4 types of Roman Cancel. Let's go over them one by one. First up is the traditional red Roman Cancel. You land an attack on your opponent and press 3 attack buttons to cancel the attack and do something else. This one got reworked in Strive. Previously, this red aura simply showed that you have successfully executed the RC, but in Strive, this aura actually is a hitbox that launches your opponent in the air unless they block it. This is probably the easiest version of a mechanic to use, and landing it is indeed pretty satisfying. Next up is the purple Roman Cancel. This type goes off if your attack whiffed or didn't land yet. You can use it to cancel out a whiffed unsafe move to avoid getting punished, or you can use it to fake out your opponent by cancelling a move before it hits and using another type of attack, like changing from high to low or using a throw. The third type is the purely defensive yellow Roman Cancel. When you execute RC while being stuck blocking the opponent's pressure, it fires off a yellow aura that cancels your enemy's current attack and pushes them away. This is more or less a replacement for dead angle attack from previous games. Your mileage may vary as to how well it fulfills its function though. I personally still prefer the dead angle attack for my defensive needs. Also, there already was a yellow RC in Exard, and it had a completely different function, which can throw off the old players. The last type of RC is the blue Roman Cancel. It occurs when you press 3 attack buttons in neutral state, which means that you don't actually cancel anything. It does slow down time like red and purple RC do, but I honestly don't think this mechanic is all that useful. Your mileage may vary though. Personally, I'd rather spend tension on continuing my offense or cancelling an unsafe attack. There are 2 more gimmicks to the Roman Cancel system. First, if you input the dash command slightly before executing RC, you will move forward in the appropriate direction when the aura goes off. This is called Dash Input Roman Cancel. This is a very useful tool for setting up combos or changing your position when you're playing defense, like avoiding command grabs. It doesn't just allow you to move left or right either. You can move up or down as well. The second gimmick allows you to cancel your RC directly into an action without triggering the aura. You do so by inputting your commands right after RC triggers, making it work closer to how it did before Exar. The window for inputs seems to be pretty strict, so it can be hard to do consistently. Both of these mechanics can be used with all types of Roman Cancel, except the yellow one. Overall, Roman Cancel is a very important and very useful mechanic that you should learn as soon as possible. Finally, Strive also adds a brand new mechanic, wall breaking. As you can guess from the name, it involves breaking the wall in the arena by smacking the opponent into it repeatedly. You will see a graphical effect indicating that the opponent did get knocked into the wall and how damaged the wall is. Finally, when the wall takes enough damage, the opponent will be momentarily stuck on the wall, during which they cannot burst, and the next attack will break it, sending the opponent flying to another area of the stage and dealing additional damage. While it does save the opponent from the ongoing corner pressure, it puts the opponent closer to the wall of the next arena, allowing the attacker to easily corner the defender again. It also gives the attacker positive bonus, which is another new feature in Strive. While positive bonus is active, your attack and defense increase by 10% and you get gradual tension regeneration. Additionally, most overdrives and Potemkin's hit knuckle break the wall on their own without the need to soften it up beforehand. This gives you an incentive to use overdrives against the cornered opponents, since you will get back all the tension you've spent relatively quickly, so there is no good reason not to take advantage of that. On the other hand, some players would prefer not to break the wall and keep the opponent in the corner. Now here's why it isn't a good idea. When the opponent is stuck on the wall right before you break it, they can press a directional input to recover in that direction, so you will be risking the opponent getting out of the corner and cornering you instead. So it's a much better idea to uncorner the opponent on your own terms. Wall break is a very fun new mechanic that incentivizes both to do combos and spend tension during a match. On the other hand, Strife also does not feature two older mechanics. The first one is the post-victory taunt. When you land the attack that wins you the round, you had a small window to perform a taunt with this word appearing on screen, and when the next round starts, the opponent would have 50 tension from the start, ready to kick your arrogant ass. This is no longer the case in Strife, where this mechanic is completely omitted. Man, now I feel really bad about giving the Tanji the finger. I wish I could apologize. In all honesty, this mechanic is not that important in greater scope of things. I practically never seen anyone use it intentionally in a match, and losing it is no big deal. What is a big deal, however, is the omission of instant kills. In every previous mainline Guilty Gear game except Overture, you could perform a special attack that would instantly KO your opponent regardless of their remaining health. These attacks were relatively difficult to land, but when you did, it would generate enormous amounts of hype, especially in Exard where you could actually combo a low health opponent into it on a winning round, which would end the match with this awesome cutscene super. This was the coolest shit ever. This awesome stuff didn't make it into Strife. This omission is baffling, not only because it takes away from overall crazy awesome factor, but also because this was a staple thing since the series' inception, just like Gatling combos. Sure, you could argue that instant kills are not very practical, so there is no reason to have them. But let's look at another similar mechanic from another fighting game, Mortal Kombat's Fatalities. Fatalities serve no other function than adding to the game's overall gore factor and coolness, and yet they are so iconic to Mortal Kombat that if NetherRealm announced that they will be completely removing fatalities in the next game, they would be facing a backlash of biblical proportions. In my opinion, removing instant kills in Guilty Gear has the same effect, and in the end, it diminishes the coolness factor of the game, which is, you know, the very thing that the entire series is based around. Overall, I do like some aspects of this game's mechanics. I really like how Roman cancel works, at least in the context of this particular game. I'm not sure how it would work in Exard, for example. But it is really annoying that I have to use RC to do something at least mildly cool looking with some characters, because they removed Gatling combos. And I find the main reason behind this change stupid at its very core. As Ishiwatari-san said in one interview, they think that since Guilty Gear was going for a very long time, the skill gap between the older players and the ones who will start with Strife is too huge, so they needed to close it in some way. This is already a bad way of looking at it, and their execution made everything even worse. They thought that by drastically changing gameplay, they could bring everyone, both the old fans and the newbies, to point zero. But it just does not work like that. You cannot close the gap between the experienced players and the newbies by stripping down the mechanics, because it's not the mastery of a game's mechanics or being able to do long-ass combos what makes you good at fighting games, but understanding the fundamentals like what to do in neutral, how to punish swift attacks and so on. And that's the skills that are universal for the genre in general. It feels like it's not a game designer speaking, but a business manager who doesn't understand the subject. Also, I am not saying that complexity is inherently good or that simplicity is inherently bad. Samurai Shodown is another fighting game series that I adore, and it's a relatively simple fighting game in terms of mechanics. But it was made with that simplicity in mind, and has other things that give it depth. Guilty Gear was designed to be a fast-paced, complex, crazy awesome game, and the way they chose to simplify it just removed an important aspect of a game that made the series what it is. As for the part where they wanted to eliminate the need to learn because learning is not fun, which is debatable, well, that's also impossible. Learning is something that is inherent to fighting games as a genre and many other video games in general. You will always have to stop and learn the game at some point to become better. This learning process cannot just be eliminated, even in the simple fighting games like the aforementioned Samurai Shodown. And if a player does not want to learn the game and become better, it's on them. They will shrug, complain that they aren't having fun instantly and then move on to something else. You cannot change that. This problem will persist in video games forever. Just look at the game journalists and their articles on games by From Software. That isn't what you should be trying to fix. Now, there is also a very legitimate problem of feeling overwhelmed by the many things that there are to learn in the game, which can actually discourage people who do want to learn the game from trying. And I would try to fix this by convincing the player that they don't have to master everything overnight, and instead, they should try to learn the game gradually. First, you get a handle on how the game works in general, what pace is like, how the combo game works, what characters there are and what can they do. And if you like all of that and decide to stick with the game, only then you start actually learning the mechanics. And whoever tells you that Guilty Gear in particular is impossible to have fun with without mastering all the mechanics and learning long-ass combos, they are wrong. And I can say that because I personally didn't start actually learning the mechanics of Guilty Gear until after at least a year passed after I started playing. I got into the series with the PC release of Guilty Gear XX Reload back in 2006. Yes, that is pronounced exex. And this is pronounced Zex. I don't know why. Anyway, Exex Reload is where the game was already very complex, but I didn't have any of it. I survived on mashing Gatlings and spamming special moves. I saw the CPU opponents using these green and red flashes and I didn't understand what they were yet, since that was back when tutorials and fighting games weren't a thing yet. Then I did something unthinkable. I opened the manual, and only then I started figuring things out. Before that, I didn't know anything and the game was still fun despite all that. Thankfully, AI was pretty decent and single-player modes abundant. I was captivated by the ridiculously fast gameplay, cool-looking characters and the heavy metal soundtrack, and that motivated me to learn the game and get better. I am pretty sure this is the perfect model for getting into fighting games. Check if you like the aesthetics first, then move on to gameplay, play casually against the computer for some time, and then, if you really like the game, then you try to learn it seriously. Okay, on that positive note, you now know how the game is played. So now we should talk about where you can apply that knowledge, as in, the gameplay modes. First, let's talk about the single-player modes. The game features a standard selection of modes: tutorial, training, arcade, mission and survival mode being your single-player choices. Logically, the first thing you should do is try the tutorial mode. It's framed as Sol and Kai having a short training session, where you are able to move about and do stuff. One cool thing about it is that you are given a full freedom on what you can do, and Kai actually reacts to your actions and will praise you when you do things correctly. This is a really nice feature. After 2 rounds of figuring out controls, you get to do an actual match against Kai so you can apply what you learned so far. The only problem with this tutorial mode is that it doesn't teach you shit. It only tells you which button does what, allows you to see how mobility works and how to use Sec Burst. It never goes into any other mechanics. This is kind of appalling considering that they wanted to make this game easier to get into than the previous ones. Yes indeed, they wanted to make a game that would be easier to enter, so they made a tutorial that barely teaches you anything. They even said why they did it. They wanted to ease new players into the game by telling them that they don't need to learn mechanics of the game to have fun. Now, this goes well with what I said before, but this is not what you should be doing when the player is already here to learn the game. Thankfully, Strive's developers weren't completely out of their minds and made a mode that would actually help you learn the game, and that is the Mission Mode. Mission Mode is separated into 5 difficulty levels, going from the simplest core mechanics to advanced high-level techniques, with last 2 difficulty levels even giving you some tips on how to deal with specific characters. This is all very good for learning the game, unlike the supposed tutorial, but I do have some issues here as well. First of all, some lessons don't seem like they fit into their assigned difficulty. Chip damage, for example, is being taught in the second to last difficulty, despite it being one of the core mechanics of every single fighting game ever. Second issue is that it's not very engaging. I think they should have instead taken the framing of Sol and Kai having a training session and applied it to most of the lessons in mission mode. Or better yet, since we are learning the game here, it would be cool for the player to be playing as someone less experienced, like Sin. Oh right, Sin isn't in the game, never mind then. The good example would be how they did that in Exard Sign, where the tutorial is framed as Sol and Sin reviewing stuff. Basically do that, but separate lessons into different groups instead of having one continuous lesson like in Exard. It would make the learning process much more engaging thanks to character interactions, and separating the lessons into groups would help you avoid feeling overwhelmed, and it would allow you to learn at your own pace. For example, take this game's crap tutorial mode and make it Lesson 1, where you get the feel for the game's pacing, how attacking works, and so on. Then you move on to learning the mechanics. Now Strife's tutorial mode is not completely useless, and we get ourselves an easy entry point. My third issue is that it's called Mission Mode. When I hear Mission Mode, what I imagine is a mode where you do some sort of challenges, like it was in Guilty Gear Execs, where you had to do fights with special conditions like this one, where you have to fight Sol with permanent super mode and regenerating health. In other words, some sadistic shit. It also can potentially lead to a problem where people will prioritize completing the mission instead of learning the lesson, but I might be overthinking this. The game also lacks the now traditional combo challenge mode that helps you to get the feel for what characters can do. For example, when I learn a character, I go to the training mode to see their normals and specials, and then go into the combo challenge, where I get the feel for what the character can do and maybe devise some techniques of my own while I'm at it. It's possible that the devs omitted it specifically so the players had to learn the combos on their own, and because, well, the combo game is very limited. On the other hand, training mode has all the good stuff you expect from it. You can adjust the gauges, dummy state and behavior, and other things to your liking. You can record actions for the dummy to execute, to research certain situations, and many more. The combo recipe function also returns from Exard. What it does is record which attacks you land in a combo and allow you to save this combo string to practice it later. For example, check out this simple Axel combo I made. Now I save this combo to this slot, and now I can practice doing it anytime. This should become a staple function for future fighting games. The devs even said that you will be able to share your combos online after an update, which will make learning the game much more fun. This is awesome. When you're done practicing and want to try what you learned, you can head into the arcade mode. As usual, you fight a series of computer-controlled opponents and fight a boss at the end. Like an Exard Revelator, the difficulty is scaled with how well you do. However, the method is entirely different and is based on rounds lost. For example, you win both rounds of the first stage, and you will be put on the extreme difficulty, where the computer will get harder to fight. But if you lose a round at any point before the boss, you will get kicked down to hard. Likewise, you lose a round in the first fight, and you will be taken to a normal difficulty. The boss fight changes depending on the difficulty level you're on. Try defeating the boss of extreme difficulty without losing a round. Something good might happen. Unfortunately, unlike Exard, the arcade mode doesn't contribute to the game's plot at all. There are no real endings either. You defeat the boss, and he just hits himself from the screen. Cue the credits. You don't even get a victory artwork like in Execs. Real shame. Survival mode is self-explanatory. You fight enemy after enemy while only restoring a small amount of health between the fights to see how long you last. Every 10th fight is against a black-colored character who has infinite tension. Unfortunately, you don't get to choose special abilities like you could in Accent Core's survival mode, but it's still functional, even if it's bare bones. The problem arcade and survival modes both have is that the AI on the opponent is not very good. It often just stands there and lets you hit it. You can't even increase the difficulty to make it less offensive to your intelligence, as the difficulty slider in the options only affects the versus CPU mode. Sometimes I feel like fighting the computer in this game actively makes me dumber. Online mode is probably where you will spend most of your playtime. Just have to wait for it to connect to a server. Okay, here we go. Before you start beating the shit out of people online, you need to complete a quick tutorial where you will learn about dressing your avatar for the lobby, how lobbies operate, and how to challenge other people. Once you're done, you will be assigned a floor within this tower, and that's where you start fighting other players. First of all, yes, these lobbies suck. I am honestly not a fan of this kind of pixelated graphics. I do enjoy it when they use downscaled graphics to imitate old NES or SNES games, but this style kind of annoys me. Thankfully, you can somewhat avoid having to deal with a lobby by standing by in practice mode, where you can fiddle around with your character while the game looks for an opponent. I am pretty sure it looks for opponents outside of your current lobby as well, so that's good. Alright, the matchmaking. You remember how the devs said they got rid of ranked matches? Well, they didn't. See this tower? See these floors? That's your ranked matches. The game assigns you to a floor according to how well you're doing in terms of victories and losses. Sitting on the assigned floor isn't mandatory either, it's more of a recommendation. You can freely move to the upper floors if you please, but you cannot descend below the floor you've been assigned to. This helps you find more people who are closer to your own skill level. If there is one problem with online playing fighting games, in addition to bad netcode of course, it's going online only for the first person you match up with to double perfect you, after which you turn the game off, uninstall it and never play it again. And I've seen people online complaining about being matched up with people well above their skill level. Well, the devs know about this issue and they did everything they could to fix it. The game puts you on a certain floor according to your skill level, but if you seek challenge or just want to have your ass kicked, you can move to the floors above. And on the other hand, the system prevents smurfing by preventing you from going below the assigned floors. This system is brilliant, every fighting game from now on has to do something like this. There are also so-called parks, which are lobbies where players can play together without worrying about the floor ranking in a more casual atmosphere. There are also player match rooms, but I never got to test them properly. Unfortunately, there are problems other than how the lobbies look. Sometimes, which is pretty often, when you try to challenge another player, the game would just fail to connect you at all. Come on. Oh bloody hell, come on! This is really annoying. One time it just straight up locked my inputs and I had to Alt F4 to force quit the game. And sometimes this bizarre shit happens. This is a bloody mess. Sometimes it will even tell you that you cannot use a cabinet because there are too many people playing. There are too many people fighting in a fighting game. So yeah, they have some fixing to do here. They really need to do something about the server communication as well, since it's a pain in the ass to wait for it to load for so long. Xrd was doing this too, but it was quick there. Thankfully, when the bloody thing works, it works. I am happy to say that this is probably the best netcode in the genre right now. The game works incredibly well online with only minor hiccups. I am pretty sure they are using the same rollback model they used in the recent Accent Core update on Steam, with some changes specific to this game. I am sitting in the middle of Siberia, quite literally, and the connection to European lobbies is good. I barely encounter any lag or rollbacking. Input delay is more or less non-existent either. Okay, that's cool, but that's not quite enough to test it. So, in my infinite wisdom, I invaded the Japanese lobbies. It was rough. You could say barely playable, but playable nonetheless. On the other hand, both US regions had very good performance. I managed to have some smooth matches there for the most part, even with my primitive Siberian internet connection. As you play the game, both online and offline, you will get the local currency, the world dollar. You use this currency to go fishing. Over here in the collection menu, you have the fishing mode where you, well, fish for items. You either spend $200 to fish for one item at a time, or $2,000 to get 10 items at once. Which items you get is random, ranging from clothing items for your lobby avatar to music tracks. But, see this? This is the rare fish counter. When you have 10 of these, you are guaranteed to get an item that you don't already have. That's right, there is a possibility of you getting a duplicate of the item you have. Pretty cool, huh? No, it isn't. There are tons of clothing items you can dress up your avatar with, ranging from a drunk redneck set to costumes of the playable characters. And that soldier is just standing there watching you get dressed the whole time, the bloody pervert. All other items you catch are moved to the gallery, where you can see concept art, watch videos, and listen to the music tracks from this game and the previous ones. I have one major problem with this entire system. You cannot buy what you want directly. At all. This is annoying. Say, you want this music track right here, but you cannot buy it, and the only way to get it is to fish it out. But not only it is random whether or not you'll get it at all, there are so many other items that the game can give you instead, and you can even get duplicates of what you already have. And pretty often you will be getting this rare fish instead of items. This is tedious beyond all hell, I don't know whose idea was it. Oh, I found it! The legendary Story BGM free! Oh joy! They should have just let you buy the stuff you want directly and be done with it. Also, the video gallery is pretty lacking. It's just the trailers and the game's opening, which wasn't even in the game on release, they had to patch it in, Jesus Christ. Okay, the final aspect of a game to discuss is the story mode. Like an Exard Revelator, the story is presented as a short anime series. It's like Daisuke Shiwatari's new album comes with a free game and a free anime series. What a deal, right? They also did everything to make it comfortable to watch. You can pause the episode at any time to look up the terminology you don't know or the correlation chart so you can avoid getting lost. The series has been going for a long time after all. You can even save your progress, quit, then come back and resume watching it later right where you left off, like on the good old VHS. As for the story itself, well, spoilers ahead. If you want to avoid them, go to here, otherwise get spoiled and live with the consequences. Okay, so first, the main crux of a story is going to the USA, and you know what? It's really cool seeing how different USA is from Illyria in terms of artistic design. While Illyria resembles a Magitech medieval European kingdom with classic armored knights and soldiers, USA looks like the modern day USA right down to the way their army looks. Seeing that was really cool. Then, the newcomers, Giovanna and Nagoriyuki. Nagoriyuki doesn't appear often, but his presence alone handicaps Sol because his sword can prevent Sol from regenerating, and Happy Chaos, the main villain, used it to make special bullets with the same properties. And when Nagoriyuki does appear, he's always presented as a real threat. Despite being enslaved by Happy Chaos, Nagoriyuki's mind is perfectly intact, and he does tell the characters that he cannot stop attacking them of his own free will. This is a very cool setup. Giovanna, on the other hand, barely has any significance at all. She barely appears on screen actually. The only scenes where she has any major role are the one where she is established as a character and when she tries to fight Nagoriyuki and gets her ass handed to her because vampire samurai are cooler than kickboxer shamans. Also, her relationship chart says that she likes Leo, but the two never actually interact. Man, what a waste of a cool character. And the problems don't end there. May, Faust, and Ramlethal never appear in the story mode proper. At all. That's 3 playable characters that don't have any role in the story, and that's despite Ishiwatari-san saying that he considered the roster specifically with the characters being part of a story in mind. While May and Ramlethal are just waste of potential, the omission of Faust is just baffling. The big thing about Faust in Strife is that he is completely different in tone from before. Whereas before he was a fun, upbeat, positive character, in Strife he looks like a slasher villain in both design and animations. He still expresses desire to help people, but he's all creepy looking and he moves like he's barely preventing himself from falling apart. And what is the reason for this? There is none. Faust never appears in the story, and we get no explanation. Even the character database only says that he just changed after returning to his roots of saving people. They decided to completely redesign Faust to look like he came out of a horror movie, but they never gave it a narrative context. So now Faust is just different because they felt like Western fans don't understand Japanese humor. This is like Toshimichi Mori's Western players like to button mash comment all over again. Dizzy, Sin, and Elfeld also never appear in the story mode proper, despite being part of a main family of characters, same as Ramlethal. There is a lot of story potential lost here. Then there are characters who do appear in the story but don't contribute to it much. The biggest offenders are Leo, Milia, and Zato, who stay on mission control throughout the whole thing and don't get to do much. Ino was hyped up as one of the game's 2 villains, but she's just sitting in the interrogation room, waiting for Happy Chaos to do everything for her. Then there is Happy Chaos himself. Overall, Chaos is a very entertaining villain who manages to carry the plot on his own. His interactions with other characters are very fun to watch, even if he doesn't do much fighting himself, mostly relying on his minions with funny bunny hats. His actual relationship with Ino is quite confusing though. So, okay, the main twist in the story is that Happy Chaos is actually the original, the guy who more or less invented magic in this universe. Okay, so far so good. In Revelator, it was established that Ino is incomplete in some way. Now it turns out that Happy Cass is that missing part of Ino. But he's the original who existed way before Ino was born. This was pretty confusing, and I actually had to go to the relationship chart and read on that to understand it properly. I don't think the story itself explains it very well. I also didn't like how they used music in this. Ishiwatari-san's trademark music takes a backseat here, with most of the background music being generic orchestra and that electronic buzzing that Hollywood movies like so much nowadays. Yeah, that one. Overall, Strife story mode is a good time, but it has serious issues with characters wasted or not used well. Okay, what else? Oh right, King Daryl is in this, and he's not a worthless piece of garbage anymore. That was pretty cool. Ooh, this game certainly gave me a lot to talk about. It does some things right, it does some things great, but what it does wrong sticks out a lot, especially since most of it is being detrimental to the very core that Guilty Gear as a series is based on. And the way the developers talked about it, the gameplay aspect of it was their intention all along. They definitely achieved their goal of simplifying the game, but I really disagree that they made it easier for the newbies. And the entire premise of bringing both the new players and the old fans to point zero, as they put it, is based on a fundamentally wrong way of thinking. You cannot close the gap between the players of different skill levels, so the only thing they achieved was lowering the overall skill ceiling for the game, as it just has less to learn and fewer tools to play with, which hurts the very premise of Guilty Gear as a whole and takes a lot of fun out of it. Figuring out what combos can be done in the game is fun, sure, but that's like tinkering with electronics or conducting an autopsy, that's always fun, as is beating up other people. In the game, I mean, not in real life. But the feeling that you're limited in your approach to the game never goes away. I always caught myself thinking that I could do this cool thing and that cool thing before, and now I cannot do most of them because the game just doesn't allow it anymore. If I had to compare it to something, Guilty Gear Xrd would be Devil May Cry 5, and Strife is Devil May Cry 1. Devil May Cry 1 is a very good game and is still worth playing even today, which is a hill I'm willing to die on. But why did we have to regress all of a sudden? The issues don't end with just the gameplay either. The aesthetics also suffered a lot. Lazy UI aside, the game just doesn't have the old kick to it, and it's most apparent with intro and outro animations, most of which are really boring. Music is really good at least, but even there is a problem with lack of special matchup theme songs. You could say that all of this is due to the goings-on, but they were doing DLC for Grand Blue Versus at the same time, and that has the cool stuff like this cinematic super. I don't think that the goings-on alone are to blame for this. And then there are the new character designs, some of which are straight up worse in terms of aesthetics due to being more grounded. Ishiwatari-san said that he wanted to make new simpler designs that can be instantly recognizable with a single glance. The problem is, this is Guilty Gear. It isn't supposed to be grounded. Being grounded, in every sense of the word, goes against the very nature of the series. It's like the game is ashamed of its parent series. I understand that this was done so that the series could appeal to more potential buyers to make bigger sales, which the game actually achieved. Arc System Works said that the game surpassed 500,000 copies, and I am really happy that my favorite fighting game devs are doing great, even if I don't like the game. But there is still a big sense of disappointment with how Strife feels to be a lesser game compared to its predecessors. And I am pretty sure that the game is doing so well not just because they dumbed down the gameplay and made the aesthetics more grounded, but because they did very well with marketing, which is another big part of growing your sale numbers. They were releasing trailers pretty often back when the game was just announced at EVO. They also made a short manga and put entirety of Xrd story modes on YouTube to help the new fans catch up with the story. This was all done to keep the hype going. They generated good word of mouth through influencers and even worked with Wooly to help him produce a series of videos detailing the story's timeline. They released the developer backyard segments, where they responded to community feedback and put up tutorial videos on YouTube to help people get into the game. They also announced that the game would have rollback netcode after the closed beta, and people knew that good netcode is important for a good fighting game, which also boosted sales. Hell, they even said that they were looking into implementing crossplay between the platforms in the future. They were doing everything right in terms of marketing. Speaking of the future, the devs also said that there are other features they wanted to implement, but couldn't do so on release because of the goings-on, and they are going to put that content into the game as time goes on, and that's in addition to DLCs they will be releasing. So there's a lot for people to look forward to. And you know, the technical issues like long-ass loading time on the title screen and whatever the hell is wrong with the servers will be resolved with time. They can probably change the crap UI and blend menus as well, so there's that. Unfortunately, dumbed down gameplay and nerfed aesthetics is not something they can fix at this point. And despite everything the devs did right, there is a huge sense of disappointment, at least for me as an old fan. Doubly so because Strife isn't just another game in the series. This was supposed to be the grand finale, something that the series has been building up to all this time. And it feels like the series is going out not with a bang, but with a it's finally over. At least Team Blue had the courtesy to wait until after they were done with their serious story to ruin its gameplay. Thanks for watching this long-ass video, my dear viewer. Since the video turned out to be so bloody long, I decided to do character breakdown as a separate video. So if you're interested, tune in next time when I will be talking about the character-specific gameplay and try to give tips on how to deal with them. Keep on rocking and I'll see you next time.